On a volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific, thousands of years before modern navigation existed, a small group of humans steps into wooden canoes and pushes off from shore. They have no compass, no maps, no radio. What they have is the position of the stars, the direction of ocean swells they can feel through the hull of the boat, and the flight patterns of birds at dusk. They are sailing into open ocean, toward an island they've never seen, that may or may not exist, based entirely on oral tradition, and a level of environmental awareness so precise it borders on supernatural. Most of them will make it. Some voyages won't, and the ones that succeed will go on to settle some of the most remote, isolated landmasses on Earth. Islands separated from the nearest continent by thousands of miles of open water, using nothing but observation, memory, and an almost unbelievable tolerance for risk. This is just one story, and it's nowhere near the craziest one. Because when you actually start digging into how ancient humans survived, not just the Ice Age, but deserts, mountains, isolated islands, and environments that seem almost designed to kill us, you find a pattern of ingenuity, desperation, and sheer stubbornness that puts almost everything in modern survival shows to shame. So what were the craziest survival methods ancient humans actually used? Let's get into it. Let's start somewhere most people don't expect. The desert. If you think surviving Arctic cold sounds hard, try surviving a landscape where daytime temperatures can reach well over 110 degrees, water is nearly non-existent, and the ground itself can be hot enough to burn exposed skin. Ancient peoples living in environments like the Kalahari and the Australian outback developed something that sounds almost too precise to be real: the ability to locate water sources that are completely invisible to the untrained eye. Certain desert-dwelling groups became experts at identifying subtle changes in vegetation, insect activity, and even the behavior of specific animal species to locate underground water reserves, sometimes digging down through solid, sun-baked earth, using nothing but sharpened sticks and bare hands, extracting water a literal cupful at a time, from a source that, to anyone else, would look like nothing but dry, cracked dirt. Some groups took this even further, developing techniques to extract moisture directly from plants, squeezing water from the roots of specific desert vegetation, or using hollow reeds to drink groundwater directly from cavities beneath the surface, without disturbing or wasting a single drop. This wasn't guesswork. This was generational, highly specialized knowledge, passed down with the kind of precision we'd normally associate with a licensed engineer, not oral tradition. Think about that for a second. No signage, no manuals, no GPS coordinates marking a water source. Just decades of careful observation, passed from parent to child, in an environment with genuinely zero room for error. Now let's talk about something even stranger: intentional physical adaptation through diet and exposure. Certain populations, living in extremely high-altitude regions, the Andes, the Tibetan Plateau, developed physiological adaptations over many generations that allowed their bodies to function in oxygen-thin air that would leave most people gasping, dizzy, or unconscious within minutes. Larger lung capacity, more efficient blood oxygen transport. These weren't lifestyle choices. These were survival pressures so intense that, over enough generations, they actually reshaped human biology itself. This is the prehistoric equivalent of an entire population evolving built-in scuba gear, except instead of a tank on their back, the adaptation is baked directly into their DNA. And it wasn't just biology bending to the environment, it was ingenuity finding wildly creative workarounds for problems that seem, on the surface, completely unsolvable. Take the peoples of the Arctic, who faced a problem that sounds almost like a riddle. How do you build a boat capable of surviving freezing open water, in a place with no trees, no metal, and no shipyards? The answer: driftwood frames lashed together with sinew, and stretched with waterproofed sealskin, creating vessels light enough to carry, flexible enough to survive pounding waves, and completely waterproof despite being built entirely from animal parts and scavenged wood. These boats weren't crude. Some designs were so aerodynamically and hydrodynamically efficient that modern kayak engineering still borrows directly from them, thousands of years later. Let's pause on that. A design created by people with no written engineering principles, no wind tunnels, no testing labs, refined purely through trial, error, and the harsh feedback of the open ocean, is still, in some form, being used by professional kayakers today. How many modern inventions can say the same thing, unchanged in their core design, after multiple thousands of years? Then there's the question of medicine. Because getting sick or injured, in the ancient world, wasn't just uncomfortable. It was often fatal. And yet ancient humans developed medical interventions that still genuinely astonish modern researchers. Archaeological evidence shows ancient peoples performing a surgical procedure called trepanation, deliberately drilling or scraping a hole into a living human skull, likely to relieve pressure from head injuries or, in some cultures, believed illness. And here's the part that should genuinely shock you. Skeletal evidence shows healed bone growth around many of these holes, meaning the patient didn't just survive the procedure. They lived for years afterward. This was happening with stone tools, and no anesthesia beyond whatever natural substances were available, and no understanding of germ theory whatsoever. Imagine being the patient in that scenario. Imagine being the person holding the tool. Neither of them had any modern medical concept to fall back on. No antibiotics, no sterilization, no diagram of the human skull to reference. Just observation, trial, and an enormous amount of accumulated, dearly earned knowledge about what tended to work and what tended to kill people. Ancient humans also developed remarkably effective techniques for wound treatment, using specific plants with natural antimicrobial properties. Honey, as a wound dressing, which modern medicine has actually confirmed, does have genuine antibacterial qualities. And techniques for setting and splinting broken bones that, in some archaeological cases, healed with barely any long-term deformity at all. Now, back to that opening scene. The ocean voyagers, because their story deserves a much deeper look, and it might be the single craziest entry on this entire list. Long-distance ocean navigation without instruments required an almost unbelievable range of overlapping skills. Navigators memorized star paths that shifted with the seasons. They could read ocean swell patterns well enough to detect the presence of land hundreds of miles before it was visible, simply by feeling how waves bounced and refracted off distant, unseen coastlines. They tracked the migratory and daily flight patterns of specific bird species, understanding that certain birds returned to land each evening, giving voyagers a directional clue even in open, featureless ocean. Some cultures even used specially constructed stick charts, mapping wave patterns and swells using nothing but bent wood and shells, as physical models to train new navigators in reading the ocean itself like a language. This wasn't a single lucky voyage. This was systematic, repeatable, teachable navigational science, refined over countless generations, that allowed ancient peoples to deliberately settle islands separated by thousands of miles of open, featureless ocean, effete European sailors, with metal instruments, compasses, and written star charts, wouldn't be capable of matching for thousands of years afterward. Let that sink in for a moment. The most technologically primitive-looking voyages, by outside appearances, were in some ways more precise and reliable than expeditions undertaken centuries later with vastly superior equipment. And this is where the story needs to shift. Because as impressive as all of this is, it's important to be honest about the cost behind it. Every single one of these survival methods, the water-finding techniques, the surgical procedures, the ocean navigation, exists because of an almost unthinkable number of failures behind them. For every successful desert water source discovered, there were certainly instances of dehydration and death before that knowledge was refined and passed on. For every skull that shows healed bone growth around a trepanation hole, archaeological records also contain skulls where the patient didn't survive the procedure at all. For every successful ocean voyage that founded a new island civilization, there were almost certainly voyages that vanished entirely into open water, with no trace, no story, and no way for us to ever know how many attempts came before the ones that worked. This is the part of ancient survival that doesn't fit neatly into an inspiring highlight reel. Every technique we're impressed by today represents not a single genius insight, but the accumulated cost of countless individual tragedies, people who didn't make it, whose deaths quietly refined the knowledge that eventually let others live. Survival knowledge, across almost every ancient culture, was written in loss before it was written in success. There's something almost uncomfortable about admiring these achievements without acknowledging that. We tend to celebrate the outcome. The boat that worked, the surgery that healed, the water source that was found, without fully sitting with the fact that these breakthroughs were paid for, generation after generation, in human lives. So, what were the craziest ancient human survival methods? Honestly, it's not any single technique. It's the sheer range of them. Turning a hollow reed into a water source in the middle of a lifeless desert, turning driftwood and sealskin into a boat capable of surviving Arctic seas, turning a stone tool into functioning surgery, turning the stars and ocean swells into a Ritz Emreli's rate navigational system, precise enough to deliberately settle islands separated by entire oceans. Think back to that canoe, pushing off from shore into open, endless water, guided by nothing but memory, observation, and trust in knowledge passed down from people who had made, and survived, and sometimes hadn't survived, that same journey before. Every one of us alive today exists because somewhere in our ancestry, someone made a similar leap, found water where there shouldn't have been any, survived a surgery that shouldn't have worked, trusted a star pattern across thousands of miles of nothing but ocean and hope. So the next time your GPS reroutes you 2 minutes out of your way, and it feels like the end of the world, remember, your ancestors crossed oceans with nothing but the stars and the birds, and they made it. What do you think? Which one of these would you have been brave enough, or desperate enough, to try? Let me know in the comments.